showing about an 18-month application of the Theory U, using something as called the Change Lab that the Rios Partners Group has developed using Theory U. But I want to also help us understand that this can be, that traveling the U can happen in a moment, or it can happen in 18 months. Years ago, believe it or not, I used to play basketball. And there were times where I could get into a space where I could observe and I would see everything that was happening on the floor. And then all of a sudden, I could feel everything that was happening on the floor. I could sense everything that was happening on the floor. And in a second, could make a move that would then realize itself in a rebound and a score. Any of you who've been an athlete, any of you in your own life, if you're an artist, you know this pattern. So it can happen in a second, or I'm going to tell an 18-month story. I had been not working in mental health for about 3 years, and the director of the Ohio Department of Mental Health approached me and he said, "Phil, would you be willing to chair an expert panel on psychiatric services for children and adolescents, and then write a report for the governor making recommendations how to improve," and really what he was after was how to recruit more child psychiatrists in the state of Ohio. Would you chair that panel? And I've been through this. I've chaired those kind of things before. And I said to him, "So what you really want me to do is make recommendations on how we're going to recruit more psychiatrists, pay them more money, and steal them from other states from around us to get more psychiatrists in the state of Ohio." And I said, "Is that blunt?" And I said, I won't share the blue ribbon panel. I said, "On the other hand, if you're willing to try something very different, that might end up coming up with a different solution to the problem, then I might be willing to do it." And I explained to him what the process was. He said to me, "Yeah, go ahead, nothing else that we've done is work." I was initially completely hit with the voice of cynicism at that point. "Yeah, go ahead, Phil. Nothing else has ever worked, so if you want to do that silly thing, go ahead and do it." So over 18 months, we traveled this U. The first thing we did was we got a group of about 5 of us or 6 of us together at the beginning of the process to start to even figure out what's the question that we want this process to be worked around. Probably took a month, maybe a month and a half of going back and forth in 2-hour-long meetings, and we'd keep playing what we came up with, the question off of the director. Is this what the question is? No, not quite. Is this what the question is? Till we finally ended up with the exact question we were wanting to study, and it was something like, I won't be able to say it exactly, but what must Ohio do to improve child and psychiatric services now? And that was the question that we ended up settling on. This small core team was the beginning of the co-initiating of the process that we were undergoing. That small team also identified a microcosm of the community, of the system of child and adolescent psychiatric care. So we identified people in parts. We identified 25 people. We had family members of children with psychiatric illness. We had chiefs of psychiatry. We had heads of mental health programs. We had judges. We had all kinds of, we had the whole gamut that we invited to be part of the process. Well, when somebody gets a letter from the director of the Department of Mental Health to be on something to study child adolescent psychiatric care, most of the time they say yes. And so we had this great microcosm of 25 people that we started the process with and ended the process with. Once we had identified the question, once we had identified who the people were, they came from the first meeting. At the very beginning, I started using hosting process because we really needed to become a team. This was going to be an 18-month piece of work. We needed to start to become a team. So we started using Circle. We started using all the things that we're learning here to start to initiate this project. We gathered data. We gathered information on all the psychiatric services in the state. We gathered national data, we gathered state data, which was part of the beginning of observing. So we could start to understand from a data standpoint what was going on in Ohio. Then we decided we needed to go out and begin to sense, co-sense this observation, in reality, what's going on. I trained the 25 people in a different way of interviewing, these sensing 2-hour interviews, that we would go out and learn from the field what the field had to say about psychiatric care for children. We together, the 25 of us, identified who were the kind of people we need to go talk to. And again, we identified probably 75, but we went out and did 50 2-hour interviews with stakeholders across the state of Ohio to sense, now to beyond data, to sense what's really happening here. I remember 2 interviews that I did. One, I did with a rural judge, a domestic and family judge in Ohio in a small community. And through the sensing interview, where we really explored why he loved his community, why he was a judge in that community, what he felt about the children in that community. In the course of the interview, he discovered that he actually that he understood the kids in that community as his kids. And through the interviewing process, when we got to the point where he sat there and he said to me, I never thought of it this way, but these are my kids in this community. Then when I said, and what kind of services do you want for your kids? His answer was much different. And had I gone and done a traditional interview, where he would have said, well, I need this, and I need that. No. What he said to me was, we're a small town. I'm never going to have a child psychiatrist here. But I want to know I really literally want to know the person I'm going to refer from the court, even if they're in Columbus. I want to know the person. If I'm referring to a psychologist, I want to know who they are, because these are my kids and I'm accountable to these families. So all of a sudden we started to understand some of the criteria for a rural judge around psychiatric care. I went and sat in a trailer, practically in a cornfield, and talked with the mom and her son, the son with very serious mental illness, and the mom, about psychiatric care. And I'll never forget, at one point she said to me, I'll tell you what's wrong with this system. I'm sick and tired of my kid being divided up into pieces and parts. There's physicians that think one thing about him. There's psychiatrists that think another thing about him. There's social workers that think another thing about him. And I'm tired of my kid being split up into pieces and parts. The title of the report that we wrote for the governor was, Kids and Families Just Want to Be Whole. What's so hard to understand about that? That was the report we wrote for the governor. And it was straight from her mouth. We did 50 of these around the state. So we co-sensed we co-sensed. This took place for almost 9 months of the 18 months, 10 months, when we were in this observe phase. Because one of the things about the you know, is this may take 10 months, but you can get from here to there quickly. After we'd done the observation, we went on retreat. And one of the things that we did in the retreat was all of us who had done all these interviews, we stood in a circle like this, and for almost 2 hours we had a dialogue using the voice of the people we interviewed. Everybody became who they interviewed. So we brought all those voices in the room. All the voices were present, so we could feel it. Once we had done that, and we were completely immersed in the field, I said to them, okay, let's take a solo walk. 4 hours in nature. While you're out there, please sense what's your role in this? And what could your role be in changing it? So for 4 hours they contemplated, who am I in this problem? And who could I be in this problem? When they came in from presencing in nature, I had tables set up. By that point, I knew there were going to be 3 dimensions to this report. One was going to be a new delivery system, one was going to be new funding, and one was going to be advocacy. And so I had 3 tables set up in the room with clay and pipe cleaners and all kinds of stuff in it. And I said, when you come, they walked into the room and I said, before you don't even take a seat, over there's system, over there's funding, over there's advocacy, go to a table and start to build the new system in clay and pipe cleaners. They were like, oh, this is pretty crazy up till now, but you've gone over the edge with this one. I said, trust me, just go over there and start to play, and start to build in 3 dimensions the new. All of a sudden, after it was kind of like a little funny laughter and kind of laughter and talking and creativity, all kinds of things started to happen. Models started to be built in each of the sectors. When we went, so we did the models, each group had a chance to share their model with the rest of the groups so they could get feedback and refine it. But interesting, one of the things we discovered, they all saw the same thing. The system people developed an integrated delivery system. The funding people saw an integrated funding system. And the advocacy group saw advocating for an integrated system. And everybody was stunned. I didn't know that was going to happen. They typed it up. We took pictures. The director came in the next day, and we presented these clay models to the director, who also really? We wrote it up. Those models became the recommendations to the governor. It was the end of his administration. Should have known. And it went on a shelf. It was brilliant stuff that happened. And the recommendations for next step were also brilliant, because they were also collaborative. Nothing's going to happen. It's on the shelf. New governor gets elected. He's a friend of mine. Hey. I'm like, yes! So Ted comes into office as governor, brings in a new director of the Department of Mental Health, who was a woman that I hired years ago to be the clinical director of the agency I was running. I'm like, yes. I talk to them. They get a few people together for me to give the report to. Well, this is pretty cool. This is pretty exciting. I leave that meeting thinking, all right, we got a shot at something happening. Nothing. Nothing. A year, nothing. One of the people that was in the project was so stoked by it. He was at Children's Hospital in Columbus. He got together all the children's hospitals in Ohio for a meeting and asked me to present the model to all the child hospitals in Ohio. I did, and again I didn't hear anything. Now it's 3 years, and I honestly was really depressed about it. We had worked really hard and done really good work. And I was depressed that, okay, this doesn't really work. I'm at a meeting at the Ohio State University, and somebody comes up to me and says, Phil, congratulations. I said, for what? And they said, you mean you haven't read there was an editorial in the Cleveland paper and an editorial in the Cincinnati paper? You haven't read what has come out of the work you did? I said, no. The children's hospitals in Ohio came together, and we decided we didn't have the wherewithal to hire more psychiatrists. And from the model, created it in a 1877 Psych Ohio number that any Any pediatrician, any family care physician in Ohio can call and immediately get a child psychiatrist consult, 24 hours a day, every day of the week, every day of the week, every day of the year, to provide quality child psychiatric care across the state of Ohio. 3 years after the whole thing was done. Out of the ashes, somebody's passion took the model, and there's a concrete thing in Ohio now, 1877 Psych Ohio, that came out of the project, that nobody envisioned when we started.